But one thing I like, you just sort of touched on them. In the book you talk about the sort of 5 things that cause disloyalty, and 4 of them are based on effort,
Yeah.
which you just touched on. And one of them you mentioned was generic service.
Yeah, right.
Sort of define that for us and what that means.
Yeah, it's, in layperson's terms, and I'd call it being treated or feeling like you're being treated like a number, not like a person. And I think that's probably the simplest explanation. Now, interestingly, we would argue that even that 5th one, if you will, or that 5th driver is still a source of effort. When we unpacked customer effort, what we found is, companies very quickly get this concept of, okay, what you're telling me is, there's not a lot of benefit to delighting the customer in the service interaction. That there's diminishing returns to throwing money at giveaways and refunds and in things that are intended to wow or delight the customer. Got it. And then you're telling me customer service tends to drive disloyalty. So if I put these things together, and the things that drive disloyalty are the things we force customers to endure, sources of effort like callbacks and repeating information and transfers and channel switching and these sorts of things. And when I put all those things together, the punchline is, instead of trying to drive positive loyalty by delighting customers, instead customer service should try to mitigate disloyalty by making the service interaction easy, by reducing customer effort. Now, when we peel apart, okay, how do you do that? Most companies tend to think of, okay, making things easy, reducing customer effort, that comes down to process changes and, going from, let's say, a tiered support desk model to a universal agent model. Have one person who picks up the phone and can, with the right tools and the right knowledge base, can actually answer any customer issue, or in-depth policy overhauls and things like that. And there is sort of food for many winters in terms of fixing that stuff. But it turns out a huge source of effort has nothing to do with what the customer actually has to do. It has as much more to do with how the customer feels about that interaction, their perception of effort. And a lot of this comes down to, and the reason companies actually struggle with this is they look at the process and the systems fixes first. They spend a lot of money on these things. It's like the Six Sigmaization, if you will, of customer service. And they ignore the people side of things, the actual interaction between their reps and their customers. It turns out that 2/3 of customer effort is actually a function of how customers feel versus what they have to do. And when you look at the feel side, a lot of it is made worse by treating customers in a generic fashion. And in fact, companies who really get this right teach their reps to tailor the service interaction to the customer, to use language in a purposeful way, not just being nice to the customer, saying their name 3 times and thanking them for being loyal, which ironically comes across as very generic to the customer, even though we're doing this from out of goodwill and it comes from the right place, but it comes across as very generic. But instead, trying to teach reps to actually identify, if from the very get-go, what kind of customer am I dealing with? What kind of situation are they in? What's their state of mind? And how do I tailor my resolution to what they need right now, into their context right now, instead of just trying to follow a prescribed generic checklist that the company's handed down to me. And we find companies who have really liberated their reps and given them the tools and the techniques to do this, deliver much better outcomes and are much more able to manage the feel or the perceptual side of effort. So even that last driver you mentioned that didn't really in our analysis fall into the customer effort side, we find generic service actually to be a big driver of customer effort. And I think you can easily tie that into the overall effort reduction concept.